I'm
All
surprised
right,
you don't.
we're live, and Eve is in the middle of a rant. So continue, Eve. Keep
No,
going with this rant. I like it.
no, I was just referring to the inconsistency in World of Warcraft, and how they're forced conflict over and over again. Because if you read any of the novels, they have a world-ending apocalypse every couple of years, like which is one of the main reasons why even the undead went down a certain road, because like they can't procreate like the other races can to fulfill the lost ranks of every war, every battle they
Yeah,
they fought into. So while I don't agree with some of the methods that Sylvanas took, if
I
I kind of understand. She's like, if you want us to continue giving support for these endless wars and endeavors and world saving events, I need to find a way to make more of us, because there's less of us each time an apocalypse happens, which is like every year to 2 years in the lore canonically.
yeah, and you'd think that would be like an easy fix. Like you think that would be an easy fix. It's like death isn't permanent. So why don't you just sign off on this document so that when you die, we have permission to resurrect you as an undead? Easy fix. Easy. Done.
I
But
don't know how many people would go for that, but I guess that would be a solution presented.
right. Well, like trolls and druids and Tauren believe in reincarnation. And shamans, I'm sorry, shamans. I think druids also believe in reincarnation.
Well, the
But
Night
so
Elves wouldn't go for that either, because their souls belong to Elune. So
sure. But like, okay, so you have people who believe in reincarnation. So you offer them, you know, okay, you like no one's putting an arrow to your head saying you have to do this. It's more so like, here's the option, right? And if you want to see your loved ones, if you still want to maintain your mortal coil here, here's an option for you. And it's not like it's permanent either, because if the undead are having the problem of losing their ranks ever so often in these world-ending apocalyptic events, all right, so you bring back these undead, you say, hey, or you have these people sign these contracts. Hey, when you die, you're going to be resurrected as an undead, and you're going to join, I forget what the undead faction is called, underworld faction.
Forsaken.
Forsaken. Yeah, the Forsaken. All right, you're going to join the Forsaken, and when you die as the Forsaken, you're done. We're going to put you to rest in your previous slotted tombs burial, and send you home with all your accolades and all the good things you did, fighting for the Forsaken and saving Azeroth and all these other good things. Easy fix. But it's Warcraft. So, I get that it's like they got to have some reason for conflict and strife, which I was going to say what Warcraft 3 did perfectly was with the Admiral of Theramore and their whole little feud with Jaina, as well as their feud with Thrall, was fantastic. It's like, yes, more factions in the world, so that there's a reason for these guys to fight each other. But World of Warcraft came along and was like, well, we're actually going to take all of these factions and consolidate them so that it's just humans versus orcs, effectively. Okay, I know it's not that simple, but effectively it's humans versus orcs. And it's like, why did they do that? That was a terrible move. That was absolutely terrible. Because now you just got rid of, you could have had humans on the hordes, or humans that are good guys and humans that are bad guys, orcs that are good guys, orcs that are bad guys. No, you just blanket it so that all humans are all good guys, or all humans are all alliance, and all orcs are horde. And it's like,
I don't think
stupid.
they did that. There are fractions within fractions, like even the trolls have, the dark spirit trolls that join the herd, while the other, like the Sandalari, Amari, they haven't, affiliation with the horde. And there are human fractions who are not affiliated with the alliance. Same thing as Night Elves. Just in like quests that you can find in their area. There's plenty
Yeah, yeah.
of people who are not
But
affiliated with
but like those guys aren't the ones. They're like in between patches. That they're the quote unquote antagonist to the story. They're not the, hey, here's an expansion pack dedicated to the Amani tribe attempting to overthrow or move in on Horde territory. Like they could Battle for Azeroth should have been something like that. I don't know. I'm speaking out of ignorance here. Battle of Azeroth should have been like, okay, the Amani tribe is trying to fight the Horde, and I don't know, the Bilgewater, is that a thing? Bilgewater, are they a human faction? They should be the ones coming in trying to mess with the humans. Or I don't know, a dwarf faction. The dwarves are coming back and they're trying to move in on the dwarves. And then it's like, okay, that's the human or the alliance's antagonist for the expansion pack. And then the horde antagonist are the trolls or the dark trolls. And then you have reason for these guys to war and fight with each other, and then it's like, okay, the alliance and horde aren't against each other, but they are going to bump into each other still. And that's fine. That's like story writing 101 right there.
There's a lot of misunderstanding that happens between the two lines that get
Yeah.
misinterpretation of events that
Well, that's
that
also where I give Vanilla WoW a little bit of a break, because Vanilla WoW had Deathwing, one of his alter egos, there. And so you had him, who's a master manipulator, you had him in between sowing seeds of destruction and seeds of discord. So
Actually, correction. That was Nixia. That was the main one that was doing that. Deathwing was actually pre World of Warcraft, and she took over from Deathwing when he was missing. So, sorry to correct you, sir.
So, question: I forgot who was the one who kidnapped Alexstrasza and started to mate her and made broods from her. Who was that?
that was Deathwing.
Okay.
Yeah, Deathwing didn't do the capturing. He taught the orcs how to capture her. And then his plan was to, well, he didn't plan, he did. He then planned to we're on YouTube, so I gotta say struggle snuggle her. And with the struggle snuggle, she made broods of his eggs so that he could have an army.
Yeah, that should be part of the Day of the Dragon storyline.
Correct. Yeah.
So, Benefactor, why don't you lead us off today in our topic at hand?
Yes.
Of course. But I would like to say one last point on the topic you guys apparently were talking about that I initially missed. Vanilla wasn't a all-out alliance versus horde. It was actually broken into various factions of the horde versus other various factions alliance, like the Night Elves versus the orcs over the Ashenvale Forest territory. That was most of Vanilla's real thing. Wasn't all-out conflict, but more of territorial dispute conflicts. But yeah, so to get us on today's topic at hand, I would like to discuss party roles within that of Dungeons and Dragons. So, to give a little oversight to everybody what we mean by party roles, the basic roles that you fit into when you join the party, such as a blaster, controller, defender, the face, the healer, the scout, the striker, and the support. We'll be going over each of those various roles. I think it'll be a good thing to discuss. This will be a little more player centric than DM centric, and I hope you guys all enjoy.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. To take a brief moment there to get myself a drink. So here I would just like to welcome everybody and meet with my co-host again, Crusader Jackaran and Eve.
Glad to be back.
Yep. Thank you for joining us here. I believe we have Niraj in the chat. We have Niraj is already starting off with. I think you're missing the wrong stream here, Niraj. Wait a minute! I thought the stream was about party rolls. Someone stop the ride! I went off. Cinnamon rolls or crescent rolls? Oh, D&D rolls. Do those taste any good? Different type of roll.
I like all three roles you asked me, but my first thing I would like to wonder, what do you guys think in general about the party role system that a lot of people kind of use to kind of coordinate parties together?
I personally think they're superfluous. they don't really capture anything, and in my opinion, force people to play things that they may not even want to play. Because I personally feel that it is like, well, if we don't have this, we're missing out on something. If we don't have that, we're missing out on something. That might dictate players into playing something they not want to play, unless the players themselves are a fill type of personality where they'll be happy just to play and they'll fill in whatever gap that they personally feel. Benefactor, I believe you consider yourself a fill player.
Yes, very much so. Uh, I usually tend to either be the all rounder or the filler, just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, there's someone that can help out and cover.
Because I just feel like you should play the game however you want to play and throw the role system out the window all entirely and just play whatever sensical or nonsensical character you come up with.
Well, I want to say something that intrigues me about the first time I saw Conan the Barbarian was the movie strikes me as a Dungeons and Dragons movie. And I found interesting was the party in that it consists of a barbarian, a rogue, and then a rogue. And I'm like, no tank, no wizard, no healer. This sounds really cool. And it's comical to me watching it, how they deal with the evil wizard, how they deal with magic. And when they finally do get a wizard on their team, he's more like I want to say like a level 1 wizard. Like he doesn't really have much combat capabilities. He's just there. He's got some wisdom up his sleeve, and he's like a few words of encouragement. But then he also has this like magical, powerful spell of like resurrection. So, like I said, when I saw that movie, I thought, all right, the roles defined in that movie are an interesting dynamic to run through a campaign with. So, I haven't been in a campaign where we've had one barbarian and then no casters. Like just one barbarian, 2 rogues. That to me is a fascinating combination, and I would love to run a game like that or be in a game like that. Because as I've said before, I don't know if I said this on stream before, but when you have a constraint like that on the players, they can be creative. They can come up with a way to surprise you, and I like that. That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Why not run a Dark Sun setting or run a low magic campaign setting? You want to see that?
No, because it's as Eve just said. It's rather it happen naturally. I'd rather let people play how they want to play. That just generally is how I run my games. Is I let people decide to play how they want to play, and if I add restrictions, it's very story specific. So like when I was running the story of Neza Nook, I had some restrictions on the players. Like they all had to be goblins. They couldn't be paladins, and I don't think I'm not sure if I allowed clerics or not. So it's like under that circumstance, there's like lore constrictions. There's a circumstance restriction. So I added like those little things to the circumstance.
Well, that's why I said, why not run a Dark Sun campaign, which has those things? That would be a story restriction from it because of the world of Dark Sun.
They're not generally my thing, Like the Neza Nook thing was supposed to be a one-shot. It wasn't supposed to be a repeated. It was just one shot. And I had a story there I wanted to tell. I don't really have a story I want to tell with... Actually, I do have a story, but it does have magic. So that is...
in the current Starfinder campaign, originally you guys didn't have a magic user, and your team had like kind of the same classes, or not the same class, but same skill sets. Like, a lot of people could hack, a lot of people were good with engineering, a lot of people were good with computer. It didn't have those roles. How did you feel about that? Because could you actually, better thing, could you label your current team in Starfinder in these roles or classes? Like, who would you consider the controller? Who would you consider the defender, the striker, or so forth?
Oh, that one's actually a little bit easier of a question to answer because I do feel we fit some particular kind of roles. To me personally, I feel our sorry. I'm trying to say the person's name, so I'm trying to remember the name of his character. I can't do it off the top of my head right now. I'm still not used to the names fully like that.
I can help you.
Uh,
I can help you out with that.
um, he's supposed to be my friend in the game, and I can't remember now.
Vorton.
Vorton. Yeah, did I remember this? I'm like, oh my god, because we haven't played in like a month, and now I'm like, it's slowly fading. Vorton, I consider him the defender type,
Mm-hmm.
where we have
Hemsall.
yes, thank you. I was about to say his Star Wars name, Himzal, who is much more I consider the striker. Where I consider what is supposed to be Quig, who I consider is mostly more along around the controller type. Where we have multiple strikers. I consider myself under the striker, and in the terms of Starfinder, I'm trying to make myself a bit of the scout slash support. With things I'm trying to make and create as my main thing really is to be really that scout and support more than the striker itself. And then we have Revenant, who is definitely just a striker.
So
So
you don't even have like a tank in the party?
no, I did. We did defender. I said no. His,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Boring.
Yeah. You did. I'm sorry.
Boring.
Yeah, but then so you saying that the party doesn't have a face?
Yeah, we
The
don't
party
have
doesn't have.
anyone that's really about that charisma skill, about that whole being the in terms of skill checks, I don't think we have someone that is necessarily a face. Yeah, we don't have someone that's about that diplomacy, that culture,
Okay,
things like that.
that leads me into the how do we quantify what roles are what. So as we discussed, the face is the person who's the diplomatic one, the one who has a high charisma style, who can influence people, who can talk up a storm in a sense.
Yeah,
Then we have the striker, who's focused on, I would say, single target high damage, or focusing a single target down, or dealing considerable damage to a focal point. You would consider that a striker?
yeah,
Then
definitely.
you have the blaster, whose role is similar to the striker. However, instead of focusing on one target, they focus on multiple targets. They control a space in an area via explosions or blasts, bombs, etc. They can control a wide space and deal high damage to multiple targets. And sometimes the damage doesn't have to be high. Is the caveat is that they can hit multiple targets with a single ability or technique.
Yeah, I would put Quig under there, but so far we really haven't gotten those kind of results. Where so far he's been most best with control grenades. So but I feel like what he wanted to do was to be that kind of like blastery, big AoE area of effect guy with his grenades. But he did mention that he did want to try to help with controlling. So, but like I said, right now he's much more under the controller aspect, where he can try to control movement in the battlefield as well as crowd control the enemies with his grenades, which he's been very successful with.
How successful? Scale of 1 to 10.
Really, go, let's go. Put me on the spot there. I plead the fifth.
You plead the fifth.
I plead the fifth.
Well, I was gonna say you guys answered one of my questions. Is what the hell is the face? Like I like that's like I was going to rant about that one, but I'm sorry, the other one is just way more rant worthy. The face, though, it's like, oh, this is a role we came up with. The face. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, it was something that originally came up to with the guy that does the charisma checks. You know, when barrel down under pressure or in face of the king, it was really someone that literally it would be typically like your bard or your paladin.
Yeah,
The
you
ones
know,
who excel in the social aspect of
Cypher came
yeah.
up with a archetype for that. They call it the speaker. And it's like, okay, that's a nice, clever way of saying this is a social character. Like that's what this guy does is he's just social interaction. He's like not useless entirely at combat, but he's virtually useless at combat.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just another way of saying it. But yeah, that was the face that was made.
Then we have the healer role, which is pseudo self-explanatory. They have the ability to recover and restore wounds and keep the party healthy. And I personally feel like healing is not only just restoring health, it is also removing of negative conditions like curses, diseases,
Yeah, yeah.
poisons.
It's cleansing and purifying injuries.
Yes.
Oh. Hey, Nathan. We have Nathan in the chat.
And the last role is support. Now, I think the word support is very broad and can be interchangeable with some of the other roles. Like I feel like a defender is inherently a support role. A healer is inherently a support role. A face character is a support role. But if you want to go like the nitty gritty, like I guess the pure definition of support is someone who like enchants the party with various positive buffs that will enhance their performance in one way or the other, whether make them tankier, make them more adept at social aspects, make them more adept at physical aspects, just overall improve their effectiveness, whether they take less damage or whatnot.
Correct. What am I here for then, huh?
To use your sultry voice to talk.
Yeah. I was gonna say the several of them that like I look at it. Blasters, to my understanding, are supposed to be the spellcasters. They're the ones that do a lot of oomph from ranged. I don't know of any blasters who are typically known as melee fighters, but I'm off the top of my head. I'm thinking of like paladins. They can bring a lot of heavy heat. But if your criteria for a blaster is AOE, which again, that's not my understanding of what a blaster is, but I'll concede I don't like these definitions for any of these roles. For this set of roles, I actually have my own set of roles that I typically go to. I like Cypher's method of roles. Cypher boils them down to like 4 classes basically, but I'll talk about that when I get to it. So for me, like Blaster is I just write that off as like a mage type or like a DPS class. Controller.
Well, hold on. Since you did that, you pretty much put your thing there with what classes you think are blasters. I'd like to hear from Eve on that point before we
All right,
start
sure.
going through everything.
Okay,
Well,
sure.
it depends on the system. So you haven't heard of any melee blasters. Well, the Solarian can be a melee blaster in Starfinder. They have various number of moves that can deal high damage to multiple targets. One of their main moves is called the Zenith Revelation, and it's called Supernova. It allows them to create a damaging area of effect. It gets larger as they go in levels. That deals a considerable amount of fire damage to everyone caught in the blast radius. And it's centered around them. So it starts from them and spreads outward. So they have to be close. So I'm sorry. I think at
Right.
first couple of levels,
let me backtrack you on this, okay? Because all right, I'll bite. And you're a Warcraft, or you were a Warcraft player. I don't know if you still play. I was a Warcraft player. So let me ask you: would you consider an arms warrior with sweeping strike a blaster?
I would more say like a Fury Warrior with Whirlwind and Cleave, because their kit kind of supports that AOE feel.
Okay,
more.
so you would, because that was going to be my next question: is would a Fury Warrior, who to the audience, a Fury Warrior is a warrior or a barbarian who's dual wielding weapons, and he's flailing these weapons around like a maniac. So I was going to ask, would you consider a Fury Warrior a blaster? And you said yes.
Yes.
So okay,
Well, an arms
would you consider
warrior
a
would be
Death
more of
Knight?
a striker.
Would you consider a Death Knight a either Wrath of the Lich King, Frost Death Knight, or Blood Death Knight, or Plague Death Knight? Which one would you consider a Death Knight a blaster?
Well, Death Knight as a whole, because it's depending on the iteration. Because at first, like spreading your diseases and blood boiling was a thing, just like blood boil damage and death and decay, and just like pop, 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 like that was a legitimate thing.
Yeah, there's Howling Blast for Frost. There was Blood Boil for
Yeah.
blood, and then there was
Well, it wasn't like that originally. I'm just saying, like, they weren't like Howling
Well,
Blast.
they weren't is a little bit split now, where you could all have like a little bit of everything. But then the topic that you bring up goes into something I wanted to bring up, where some subclasses help change the roles that you can pick from. Similar to that with Death Knight, where you can say, Holy Death Knights in their current iteration are much more close to Striker, where the Frost Death Knight is much closer to a Blaster type with a lot of various AoEs and well, mostly AoEs and a lot of constant overtime bursts of AoEs.
well, yeah, that goes into what Eve was saying just a moment ago when we were starting this. Is okay, are we going to conform or telegraph our roles to the other players or to the DM so that they know what we're doing? So I'm going to play a paladin, and I'm not going to be a blaster. I'm going to be a scout. I'm going to tell my team, hey, I'm not playing like this hardcore damage dealing paladin. I'm going for this type of paladin. And my guy, for his lore reasons, he's one with nature, and he's more bonded with knowing about the world and the environment. He's not really out here for a holy crusade. All right. But okay, now the team is looking at me like, all right, we have a paladin who isn't our tank. He isn't our damage dealer. He's just this like pseudo support character or scout.
Me and the Benefactor, I kind of agree with that. I think that is very important. We do this a lot when we introduce our characters and we tell them what our particular,
Skill set.
forte is. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
Forte. I like Forte better though. We'll go Forte.
we do that all the time, and even in this current iteration of the campaign, his character was the leading force behind that, to find out like what each person could do individually, because that actually is really helpful in dynamics that not only in combat but outside of combat too. If you don't know one of the people that you've been traveling around with is good at talking with people, you might take it upon yourself to start initiate conversation when you have a person who's better or more capable than you. Just because their name, quote unquote, paladin is, that doesn't mean they have to adhere by whatever, I guess, a paladin is supposed to be. Because I'm like, if the person could build the paladin in that way, where they can be a scout and they're close to nature, and the example that you gave, that means that is a paladin. Like, hard stop. That's just another form of what a paladin can be. It's just a different paladin.
Yeah.
So
Mirage says an A10 Warthog is also a support role. Brrr. That's correct.
So I personally think that, yes, that is actually very important, because that gives the other players an idea of what the team and their skill sets are in general, and can better, accommodate for whatever is lacking, or the strengths of the party. Like, what is the party strong at doing because of the group dynamic, and what is the party weak at doing because of the group dynamic?
Yeah, which also lets lead to people always getting their own time to shine. It's something that I always am a fancy of, is letting everybody in their own way, shine. You should know as well, Crusader, that I'm big on giving people the right job for them. They tell me what they're good at, and it's like, okay, I will make sure that when the time comes, you definitely would be the person I look for to go get the job done, so that everybody sees you and congratulates you. You helped us go and move forward. Instead of that, like, just either doing it all upon myself, or everybody's just doing things that they're not particularly built for. And I don't mean that in like a literal sense, but both literally and figuratively, they're not really built for, and then failing and then feeling bad about themselves. Uh, and this is why I always like session 0 for groups, because that's something that can be brought about in a discussion. I think based on what Eve said early on, Best mentioned early on, about having people feel like they're forced to do a role. I think that's to me where the DM has to come in a bit and be like, I make sure like the players understand, like, no one should be feel like they're forced to do something because they're lacking it. The game, you don't have to worry about something like that. But for the sake of you guys as a group going in, it's good that you guys can discuss what you guys want your characters to be and do, so that there's an overall understanding together in that. which again I also that would be done like he said, like in character as well, where the characters themselves also know, okay, this is my forte.
Yeah, like I said, that's something that when I look at these roles and they become as niche as they are, it rubs me the wrong way. You know, I'd rather look at it as like I go with like the typical. I like the Warcraft method of you're either a tank, healer, or damage. You're one of those three things. I'm not saying you can't have a party of 5 damage. I'm not saying you can't have a party of 5 healers. You can't have a party of 5 tanks. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying those 3 roles to me like perfectly encapsulate the freedom that the player should have in making their characters and doing whatever it is that they plan to do. Now
But
that
that
could
only
be
really leads it down to combat roles. Those are like 3
right.
combat roles. What if you're in a game that's not all about combat? Like I said, that's why there are things like people that make themselves built towards being a scout. Some people are more built towards being those charismatic talker types. There's people that are built around more of their knowledge skills and things like that. I
Yeah.
think having a much broader range gives a more fair assessment of the multiple things that someone can do. No one's saying you have to be just a blaster or just a controller, but when you put it down that someone has to be a tank, someone has to be a healer, someone has to be a damage dealer, I feel that's a lot more restrictive on the outside of combat part, especially, or on somebody wanting to be much more on a like myself, versatile base where I won't fit any of those 3 particular. I'm someone that will be much more flexible in that I rather be able to fulfill a role that someone is down in or someone that is not here today while I'm here. I will cover for them. That's why I don't really for a tabletop RPG. I don't think that the Holy Trinity works. That's why I like the party composition role that tabletop RPG people have come up with over the long spanning of time, because they fill in for what is a tabletop RPG more than it is a like MMO or regular RPG standpoint.
Which that leads
Well,
into an actual problem that actually arises when it comes to certain games, where some people are so focused on combat roles, all they do is pick things that are only combat situation.
they seek
Like
to optimize, yeah.
they don't have anything that will be help outside of combat, like identifying things, or things that will help you in like hiding from certain enemies, or dispelling certain curses, or whatnot. Or they don't see the uses in those type of spells and you or abilities. And you see a lot of the times when people create characters, there's like, how much damage does this do? Can I use this in combat? And not thinking of what about the other stuff that happens outside of combat. And I feel like from what I've seen throughout multiple people talking about their play groups in general, is that it's an actually legitimate issue. People focus so much on the combat that outside of that, what are the other skills useful for? Maybe you don't have tiers of what abilities are
Well,
useful and what are not useful.
yeah, that's actually one of my problems with the Warlock class in 5e is that it just feels so constricted and limited in what it can do that I mean the meme is that all they do is Eldritch Blast, right? But that's because it's effectively limited to just that. And so it's like to me it's like, well, it's not really a flexible class outside of homebrewing and adding some things to give it some flavor. And that I'm probably an outlier with that opinion, but that's just my assessment of having played one and having seen other people play them and watching their interactions, watching their role playing, watching how limited they look or feel, you know. But
Yeah,
what I was going to
oh, sorry, I was gonna say, because I disagree, but that goes down to not just the meme, which is a little bit true. For combat, yeah, they're all Eldritch Blast, but I think that's because that's a meme of a joke, because that's all they can really do. Where combat is their main damage source. But in terms of the actual ability for role playing, there's someone that can either be a face support caster. It's based on your choice of Eldritch invocations. And that's the big thing.
Well,
It,
that's
it just
something.
goes into maximizing for combat, where a lot of them using Eldritch invocations to maximize Eldritch blasting, where you have so many other choices you can do. You can get things like speak with animals through beast speech. You can, if you don't have it, gain proficiency in deception persuasion skills from beguiling influence. There's a lot of like skills, spells, and things you can gain through
True,
your Eldritch
true,
invocations,
true
which
sight, understanding languages.
yeah, that is supposed to be the customization, which leads to a very heavy customization between Warlock, because they have realistically a very large way of being different through the different choices of invocations. That's why I just feel that a lot of people go for, which like you said, really restrict themselves to being only combat effective. They don't really see the nuance in some of these other abilities that could be useful. And I also think that's just along the lines of the DM really explaining a bit of what the game is about.
I don't necessarily think that as well. I personally think it's the player's perception on what is useful and what is not.
Yeah.
And I
That's what I think it is.
and I think it really depends on how they perceive the game is gonna go. Because if you tell the players, like you said, if you give them, session zero, that this is going to be more of a story based game, and not going to have combat, a person picking strictly combat abilities is not going to function as well in that particular campaign. But if you tell someone that you're going to have a mix of combat and role play, I still feel people fall in the line of I'm going to pick more combat related things, even though you said there's going to be a mix of both. Like it's going to be a balance. I still feel like people lean more towards picking things that are relatively useful in combat, because the way some spells or abilities are written just don't come across as useful in events, and that's player perception. Because you and as well, I know there's some spells that are like boss, and then when we use it and other people's like, wait, it can do that, and we're like, yeah, like, do you not read the spell? Like, or people misunderstand it. So for example, the common thing that you talk about, Benefactor, is the zone of truth. How people misunderstand how that works, or how to finagle around zone of truth. That people think that zone of truth is just like, oh, you must speak all truths in it, you can't lie at all, and there's ways to get around zone of truth without actively lying. You can withhold information and not lie.
Yeah. Oh, I refuse to try Zone of Truth so much. In both your games, someone tried to use Zone of Truth. I'm just saying, like, but why?
But players' perception.
Well, that mean they're interpreting it like Wonder Woman's lasso.
Yeah.
Like, I'm compelling you to the truth. You cannot shy away from lie. Like, you can't lie, and you have to tell me the truth. You have no other option. That's how they're inferring Zone of Truth works.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can speak the truth without giving them any meaningful information. Like, you can say true statements that have nothing to do with what they ask, because the thing does not say I have to answer your question.
Correct.
You just can't willingly lie. Like, you can't like willingly. I could be like, the sky is blue. Like, that's true. That's a true statement. Am I answering your question? No. Whatever the question is, the sky is blue. Or you could just refrain from speaking in it. There's nothing in Zone of Truth that they must answer your questions either. It's like, I choose to remain silent. But my thing is, like, because of that and players' interpretation of the usefulness in spells and abilities, there's no interpretation when it comes to damage. It does the thing, it does whatever listed number it is, and then that's it. You don't have to interpret anything. There's a numerical value of how much damage it could potentially do, high end or low end. And that's, you see what you get when it comes to damage dealing spells. While the other utility spells have more to it, and it gets more nuance in how they can be implemented, which makes people have a skewed vision on how they work.
Well, right, and again, I'm going to go back to every Pug game I've joined. All of them have had an emphasis on combat. All right. So when I look at a warlock and I'm saying, all right, how do I make this guy balanced? How do I make him as rounded as possible so that I can manage any circumstance I get thrown into? I'm looking at it and saying, all right, I can choose to give myself more spells that can allow, and again, maybe I look at this too much like a detective. So I look at it as give me more spells so that I can do more detective-y stuff. But that comes at a cost of I'm going to be less combat effective, which, if all I'm doing is Eldritch Blast, that's all fine and good. But again, to my experience, all of that detective-y stuff doesn't really matter, and you could say, oh, well, you got to have, that's where session 0 comes in. That's where talking to your DM and understanding what the DM, you could say all that. But again, to me, it's just, I look at things like that and I say, Warlock is not very good, in my opinion. In my opinion, not very good. And, you're right. You are right, which I'm going to backtrack on this as well, is the roles, the party roles that we were just talking about, the outline of them. That's not really a role if you're a scout, face, and defender. That's not a role. Those are like tasks that you're choosing to take upon, not roles. A role would be like a position, a thing that you do. And
A role would be a function someone assumes or a part played by a person in particular situations. So that would be a role. You being a scout is a role because your role is to, when we're going along and try to go, so we say we're going to go into this dungeon that is full of goblins. We need you, the scout, to go in there and literally do that job to see how many goblins are in there. Go around, see where they're located at. Is there any way we can sneak past them? If we're talking about role, that is role. It's a position,
okay,
job.
Yeah,
You want to check
right,
by name.
Fair. Yeah. All right, you convinced me. All right. I'll bite.
So by that, who do you think fits the controller role then? Like which classes, in your opinion, fit that role?
Who you talking to? Sorry, we got these names here, please.
No, it's a question for both of you. However, you guys choose to, the order in which you guys choose to answer. I wasn't asking this to any person in particular. It was to both you guys.
Well, I thought you say ask who first. My apologies. I don't want to answer it and we both answer at the same time. So okay, I'll go. So for me, I consider, not counting subclasses, but overall of classes, because I could also break down some, but I'll just do that.
Also, state the system that you're going to be referring to as well.
5e. That a lot more people are more versed in. So as I said, I'll do 5e. Bard makes good ones. Druid, especially with things like their web and tangle roots. Let's see, casters in general, I think, make really good controllers on their own because they have such a wide array of spells that really fit that role of crowd controlling and removing people from the battlefield. They're ones that I consider much easier to really fill that out, with things like banish, web, entangled roots, whole person, whole monster, dominate person, dominate monster. I just go through a list of
command spell.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I go through a list of spells. Which,
fear is a great control spell.
Fear is great controllability, which in that, if you add, and this is why I say we go into subclasses, this is why I also love the Conquest Paladin, because that helps me fulfill the role of defender and controller, which I did with Dimitri, where I can fear a whole host of enemies. And it's like, you guys can't get past me to my team, and anyone that didn't, didn't fail, come at me, bro.
So for controller, would you consider effects like darkness and stuff controlling, like increasing the enemy's chance to miss?
I would consider that soft control, like soft. Like that's more like a support thing. It's a debuff, not really stopping them completely, not locking them down.
I was just say that I would probably put that more under the support category, but I would not say that it's not one of those things that overlap with controller in terms of the crowd control aspect. I think something that's one of those overlappers, but I personally would just fit it under more support unless you are a controller and you just end up having it. But generally, I consider that something that's a support player would really be going for.
Or what about a spell that, causes like a storm or effect that makes the area now difficult terrain, makes it difficult for people to traverse, or see like sleet storm or something like that.
That I consider it would be controller as a crowd control, which is same as doing like web. That's why I use web as actually the first example. That's what web pretty much does. It makes difficult terrain on the ground, anyone that walks on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm thinking of like making the terrain uneven. That works as an escape route. So if you're trying to run away, by you putting down an uneven terrain in a location, that's creating it so that when the enemy pursues you, they're not able to pursue you as fast. It's delaying them. It's postponing their action. So to me, that inherently becomes a controlling maneuver, a controlling element. That's inherently what that does.
Okay. There's a spell in Pathfinder for me. I think it's called Solid Fog. So it has the same property as Obscuring Mist, but it's a dense fog that physically stops people from moving if they don't pass a specific check. Like they can't traverse the fog.
Yeah, so that I would consider that a controller thing.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to go on the record here and say I fucking hate the idea of a controller. I think that is such a stupid fucking role. Okay, it's stupid. It's like, guys, I'm going to do the job of control. What? Yeah, that's what I'm here to do, is control them. Well, why not just be like everyone else and just say, hey, I'm going to lock down this one guy with my one spell? Like, why are you like, I'm going to dedicate my role to being the controller?
So what would you have them label themselves as then? If they had to pick a label, if they had to choose like, this is what I call myself.
Anything but a controller. Anything. I don't care. You can have it Pillsbury Doughboy. I don't care. Saying that, hey guys, my entire purpose being here is to control other people is stupid. It's like that's my job, guys. I'm useless at everything else, but I am able to control the enemy. No, get the hell out of here. That guy's off my team. I don't want him.
That's their primary thing, right? That's the thing that they default to the most. It doesn't mean they're useless at everything else. It's just their go-to objective is to first control whatever situation is out there. It doesn't mean that they don't have other tools outside of it.
I was about to say, I feel offended as Tomias, which is why I was really upset with where I could barely use my banish and other like control spells. Because that was one of my key things I wanted to also do as supporting the rest of the party, was kind of like remove dangerous obstacles.
Well, you didn't do that very well. I gave
you
several opportunities to do those things.
I call bullshit when there's like 10 monsters. I'm not really removing that many off the initiative list to really matter. At that point, I'm better off fireballing.
Yeah, that's malarkey.
And then when I remove somebody that should be removed, that brother came back in his giant death machine.
Nigga.
All right. So I'm just saying. Now, maybe you did give me moments that I missed. In various situations where, depending on our party situation, I may have been like, okay, I might have to be a striker in this situation and just take the targets out. Especially after a while when I feel like, okay, I feel like I'm going to be stuck more blasting how many enemies there are. At that point, I'm about to go to my primary role and just strike. The thing that I originally did intend to Tomias to do is be like a control striker, like remove 2 people and then strike at the rest.
Well, in Starfinder, there's a caster class called Mystic, and they're basically the cleric of the game system. And instead of deities, well, technically they can worship deities, but what they call is mystic connections. So they can either have the connection connect to the deity itself or the fundamental aspects that the deity represents, like the core values or the fundamental laws that connection applies. And one of them is called Overlord, and that is the mindset that there's a hierarchy in every system in nature, and then there is always something at the top dictating the actions and stuff of the others. And the whole purpose of the overlay is to dominate the will of other living sentient creatures. And all the connection powers gives bonuses to dominate spells, control persons, and they have their own unique spell-like abilities that function like dominate person. They have a passive ability that if they dominate a person and the effect ends, the person loses all memories of being controlled by you. They have another passive ability. If you succeed, it's called Echoes of Obedience. If I remember the name of the passive. If they succeed in a save to not be dominating you, your will is still opposing them, like your lingering thoughts in whatever you try to do is still lingering in their mind, and they incur penalties because of it. But that's not
Yeah.
the only thing that they can do. They can do various other things, but that's just their.
But see, that's more nuance, okay? And as Niraj says in the chat, they tried the controller role that way in DCUO. It just fell flat, and that's exactly my point. Like, and that's what I'm thinking. Like with these role things, when we started this conversation, is I'm probably coming at this from the superhero angle, and so I look at it as like very laser focused. And as you guys pointed out and argue very well, that you can wear multiple roles. You can do multiple things. But I'm looking at it like, okay, the controller here, if his job isn't as you're describing, Eve, like if he doesn't have anything like, hey, I can control multiple minions and I can dominate the mind of someone else, and I can also summon tentacles to lock down my foe. Like if he can't do that, that to me is like, you are a shitty role. You're a completely stupid role, and absolutely dumb that you're even here, because we could have you as a damaged. We could have you as a blaster, and you could be blasting things. We could
Okay,
have you.
I'll give you that, but that could apply to any role. I could be a blaster and fail at every spell.
I
I
mean,
could be a
we had a
striker.
defender that sucked at being a defender. I
We
mean,
can have a striker that misses every attack. And at that point, you're failing at your role.
No. I'm saying, okay, with my understanding of controller abilities, okay, other than like, what is it, dominate mind? What other ones allow them to control multiple minds of the enemies? What other spells are there? What abilities do they have to have multiple enemies? Like, you have to be a druid to summon animals. Like, you could summon a flock of ravens or something.
Well,
right?
there are different types of things. For example, and you don't necessarily have to control the person as in, oh, I make you do something. For example, there's another spell called Paranoia, which makes a person cannot differentiate friend from foe, and everyone is foe, meaning they have a
Yeah, it's
chance.
basically it's like confusion. They just cast a confusion on the person.
But that is a form of control. You're taking away their ability to discern and address the situation around them. Control doesn't necessarily have to be I lock down a person. Control doesn't necessarily have to be I take over their mind. Control is I manipulate the situation that garnishes benefits to my side and incur negative or penalties.
and as you're saying that, I'm sort of just like, you're not making a good case to me. like I said, I'm
well, I'm not
hearing
trying
this.
to make a good case to you. I'm not
Yeah.
in essence trying to convince you. I'm trying to say what
Yeah.
a controller is, just flatlined. Whether you agree with me or not is not in question here. It's more of like, this is what a controller can do. They're not specifically one thing. It's controlling the battlefield in whatever tools that they decide to pick up, whether it's changing the terrain, blinding a person, manipulating their mind, or taking away their ability to think straight. That is all forms of control.
Making it easier for your allies and harder for the enemy. If I was able to actually play Nicholas, you probably would have saw a controller. Because there's various other spells that you can do in combination. There's ones that do damage as well as make difficult terrain. There's ones that literally, like I said, there's bands that can remove multiple targets.
And like I said, I chalk, and maybe it's just I'm that old school. I chalk that up to, that's just support. Like that's just support. Like you're just supporting the team.
Well, you could use that interchangeably. A controller could essentially be a support type person, but
Yeah.
how they go about supporting is controlling the situation. It's like
Yeah.
it's more like a support can be broken onto how you go about supporting, because a healer could effectively be a support.
Correct. Yes.
So I feel like if you want to label it that way, the way that a controller.
So then let me put it this way. Okay, because we're talking combat. Let's remove combat. Okay, how is a controller helpful or useful in a non-combat situation where you would say, I don't want a support, I want a controller?
That's pretty easy to actually say. There's spells that like friendship, charm person. There's things you could do with other various spells that could literally help with a situation.
So
there's command.
What makes those different from a support, though?
So the general understanding of what a support is someone that buffs and debuffs the party. For example, haste and bless, or debuffing things like blinding or giving penalties such as bane and other various effects. That's the main difference between support, healer, controller is that very specific thing of doing party buffs and debuffs. Now, again, there's no one saying that there's not small overlaps. Like, there's small overlaps with debuff supporting. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be that. But this is to be a much more specific range. That's the underlying understanding of the differences. Yeah, now, if you want to say they're under the same category, by all means, no one's going to, like, really sit there and be like, oh, no, and argue with you. You know what I'm saying? This is just the overall, I'm trying to find the right word, community agreement. We'll put it that way. On what these
you're struggling because it's stupid. I know.
No, I'm not struggling. I'm struggling because
you're
myself
because it's a stupid role.
Yeah. So for another example, let's just say your people are trying to run away from people.
Fair. I'm sorry, man.
Turning a place into like vines and making it difficult to be chased after. Is a way of controlling the situation. Creating mist or fog, or preventing people from seeing where you guys are to escape a deadly situation before it turns into combat, is what a controller could do.
I mean, you play League of Legends. That's why the difference between enchanted support and controller support, the between Nautilus and say Sona or Lulu, it's a difference.
No. See, I wouldn't go to the League of Legends example because League of Legends is one of those that would just piss me off with how stupid they have, or how stupid people. Because League of Legends itself doesn't have that. People have applied this idea of, oh, there's a controller support.
No, Riot themselves actually support that. They even have updates. They have assassin updates. They have literally tank updates, bruiser updates. They themselves actually support those. That's actually
if you go to their store for this episode. I went to their store to see how do they categorize their characters. They don't categorize them that way. You want to know how they categorize them? They categorize them marksman, fighter, tank, assassin, support, mage.
Tank.
6 roles.
You missed tank. It. You missed tank.
Oh, did I say? I thought I said tank. Okay, yeah, tank. Okay, so 6 roles. There's only 6 roles. There is no controller. They don't put. Now they do describe when you click on individual characters. They will describe them as like there's a like controller. Then there's, I forget, a specialist. I think they have specialist as one of them. Like Graves is considered a specialist.
Yeah, but the reason why they have those distinctions is because their functionality. They don't function the same. The type of support that they bring to the table is controlling.
Like I said, dumb. If someone comes to my party, they're like, hey, I am a controller. You're off the team.
I'm sorry that
you would kick me off immediately. Then that was my first thing.
Yeah. I'd be like, no. And
then I'll be like, okay,
bring something else.
Goodbye. No, I'll be like, and then I'll just
say something else.
No, I'm just gonna cut you to another dimension. That's all.
One of my favorite.
I have a commanding presence. Oh, okay. I like this guy.
One of my favorite
Sorry.
types are controllers because a lot of times controlling is like playing chess, knowing what ability to use in what situation, how you can
Right.
manipulate the enemy.
Right. And that, like I said, you're coming at me with, I'm a controller. Get out of here. No, I'm going to laugh you out of here.
It's
But
a
if you
shame.
come at me and you're like, I'm a commander. Ah, okay, come on in.
And that's when you realize, oh, I have not a single combat skill, and I'm only here to talk to people.
Well, that's fine. That's a social guy. That's a speaker. That's Cypher calls. That's a speaker. I'm okay with speakers. I like speakers.
So you're not okay with people using CC or crowd control on the
Well,
battlefield,
no. They're not. They didn't come at me saying I bring crowd control. They came at me saying I'm a controller.
which is them saying they bring crowd control.
No. That's
So,
them saying my
so
whole.
what it is that you're nitpicking about the word itself, controller,
Yes.
not
Yes.
the actual.
Well, it's the word itself on top of what do they actually bring to the table.
But I said, what if they bring CC? It's like, oh, they didn't say that. They said they were a controller. But now you're saying that as long as they say that they bring CC to the table and call themselves Pillberry Doughboy as your example, you don't care what they do.
No.
That's what you said. You said Pillberry Doughboy. You don't care what they call themselves except controller.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
bring CC to the table, and that's Gooch. Welcome to the team.
Yes.
So it's really about the name then.
Yes. Because as I said, if you're coming at me with the controller, I'm going to think, all right, this guy is going to control and dominate the minds of my enemies. And if he can't do that, then get out of here. I don't need
your hub is over
I'm in
the
here to
semantic of
crowd
the bloody
control.
name. Really?
No,
It's
no.
over no, it is. What you just said. Your problem is the semantic of the name. You hear controller and you're thinking of one thing specifically. That is your problem. You're not thinking of it as a greater whole. That's literally what you just said. If they come and say controller, they better be talking about that they can mind control and whatnot. They can't do that.
Yes,
Yeah,
is
your
an
semantic,
absolutely
your problem is
stupid and
semantic of the
silly
damn name. Okay, moving on then. Your problem is semantic of the name. Copy. I'm not gonna. I got that after that. Cool. All right. So now my thing is talk about defenders as a party role. What class do you fill that role, and why so? Starting with E. I want to start with E. I want to hear the black man. Black people first.
I'm not black. No way. Me, never.
He's not black. He's this little anime weeb thing with
Konni-
like goat ears or something.
Konnichiwa. But no. I'm not sure because the defender is a weird thing for me because tabletops don't really support a defender playstyle or the typical tank role because there's no real way to like force enemies to make you the ire. Now there's role play ways and depending on how you talk to the DM and sometimes even homebrew editions, that could be like, oh, I am the protector of the group. But defender to me is also interchangeable with support because there are spells and abilities that you can cast as paladins and whatnot that will increase the party's defensive capabilities, either whether they take less damage or you take less damage or whatnot. So I guess I would say paladin could fit that, druid, fighter, barbarian could fit a defender. If we're just looking on 5e, from a Starfinder perspective, soldier, vanguard, Solarian, and a mechanic depending on which you build. If you go the experimental armor build, you can be a defender in that regard. Yeah,
All right,
and that for me it's just like overall tankiness. Like I'm a big meaty boy.
I wanna chime in here, because we have some chats here that are going on. I wanna let some of these guys in here. I wanna let some of these guys, weigh in. So hold up, we have Joe's here. Been a gadget controller in DCUO for 12 years at Niraj. A lot of fun. All right, so this guy had fun as a controller. All right. Niraj says that was his first tune way back. All right, that was his first tune. So he has some experience talking about this. And then what is it? There's someone said something here. Okay, so we have Joe says the controller by definition controls the battlefield. Sure. 100% agree. Sure. Then here we are. Here's something he said. Control is about debuffing and stunning first and foremost. Then supply mana. All right. So going on what we're talking here about Defender. Okay? Defender. I disagree with you, Eve, where you say that, like, oh, there isn't really a way to defend, because like you're saying with controller and my argument against the name controller, Defender doesn't have to follow into the concept and idea of a MMO tank who, hey, I'm the one who always grabs aggression, who always grabs threat. You can, as a defender, do that thing where you walk up to someone and stop them from doing something else, like a controller. But instead of calling it a controller, we're going to call it a defender because semantics, and tanks can do that. Now,
well, I mean, that anyone could do that. Like,
technically, yes. Technically, yes.
By
However,
what you're saying, anyone could be a defender.
However, the difference being, if the defender's options, the tank's options are stun the person, attack the person, or raise my defenses, which is optimal under this circumstance? Well, if he has a controller who's a wizard, or let's say a sorcerer, and the sorcerer is like, I have the choice of controlling or blasting the motherfucker, which do I want to do? And the tank is like, all right.
See, but here's the problem that I have with that. You give multiple different things for the tank to do, like buffing themselves, defensive, but you say controller, but doesn't give multiple things that the controller can do. What is controlling?
I just did.
No, you didn't. You said controlling, and that's it. You didn't say controlling like in binding their movements. You didn't say controlling like
controlling being the all blanket of control. Okay. And he has that option. That's option one. Then
but you didn't give the all blanket of defending. That's the point I'm trying to make. You didn't say just defender doing defending.
No, because I'm breaking it down to their action choices.
But you didn't do that with the controller, though. That's what I'm saying. You just said controlling. You didn't break down the actions. You're just using controlling as the overall blanket, like you said. Right. Why are you not giving controller the same reverence that you're giving defender? You brought this up.
So, okay. Let me break down this, because your argument here is retarded. Okay. You're saying because I didn't break down, he has the choice of stun, slowing, or sleep. Okay, he has the choice of all those three or fireball. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And his choices, he has those four choices.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to decide which is the optimal choice to make right here and now.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the tank, who can choose, I can taunt, or I can try to intimidate or debuff him. I can attack him. I can stun him or crowd control him. Or I can take a total defense. Okay, those are my options. All right. Which is more optimal from the defender's standpoint versus the controller's standpoint?
It's situational.
Right? It is, correct. All right. And that's a part of my whole point of why controller is stupid. Because whatever circumstances you're in, it might be optimal for the healer to do the controlling instead of having the tank. But it might be in a circumstance where the tank is better to do that. And to have one guy whose whole purpose is, hey guys, the whole reason I'm in the party is to control people.
So why have a defender? Why have someone's whole purpose of being a defender? Why have someone's whole purpose of being a healer?
Because a defender's role can be multiple things, such as diving in front of several people and taking hits. A controller can't dive in front of several people and take multiple hits.
Because that's not what their job is. A controller,
right? Their job is as useless as I'm going to sit here.
Okay, your argument now I'm going to say your argument is retarded, because you're trying. No, actually, it's retarded because you're saying the controller doesn't have the same kind of options and variety as a fucking meleeer. Excuse my language. Who can I can defend by standing here defensively, giving me bonus to my AC. Oh, so that's what you're gonna do? That's gonna stop the nigga in the back slinging spells, who's gonna blow up
Yes.
half the team by fighting defensively. That's what you're saying. In that instance, where he decided that in that situation, he was like, my most optimal move is to stand here and fight defensively, while there's a caster in the background casting slow or fireball or entangling roots on your entire team.
Okay, Eve, let me ask you. In Warcraft, what
Go
was your
for it.
main role?
My main role, healer,
Your main role.
healer.
Okay, that explains so much. I'm the tank. I was a tank main. So, like, my mentality is like, I know tank. I know tanking.
I know tank suite doesn't mean I haven't played. For example, Final
Sure,
Fantasy
sure.
14, my main role is tank in Final Fantasy 14. Like I've played multiple MMOs. My main role is tank in Guild Wars. Like
Sure.
that doesn't mean anything that I've main support in one particular.
It
game.
does. It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Because I've had as a tank.
So what
I
you
don't know.
so what you're saying is that my experience with multiple different roles in multiple different games means nothing because I played one particular role in World of Warcraft.
No. That's not my point.
So
That's not my point. My
so
point is your mentality. Okay, your mentality.
what is my mentality?
That's where it starts. It starts with
So-
your
so-
mentality.
So
So
what is my mentality? Explain it to me.
So if you're coming at it from a healer's mindset,
No, I'm not
Okay.
coming from a healer's mindset. I told you I played multiple different roles for multiple.
you're
different
coming
games.
at it from a healer's mindset because your mentality is the healer or the spellcaster in the back. That's not a tank's mindset. Tanks don't give a shit about the spellcaster in the back.
They could
don't
when they have that's retarded. You have ways in World of Warcraft to stop casters from casting spells.
That's not the
And-
job of the tank. The tank doesn't give a shit.
So what's the point of having those moves then? What's the point of putting those moves in the tank's toolkit? Why do they have the ability to silence casters? Why?
Because there might be a circumstance in
Oh, so there
Hold up.
might be a
there
situation
might be a
where that can be
circumstance
used,
in
right?
PvP. There might be a circumstance in a fight with a 5-man group. Okay. Not in a raid. Now, in a raid, there's maybe one fight, 2 fights where that could be valid and applicable. Okay. However, in a 25-man raid, you don't have anyone else who can do the interrupts. No one.
Most of them are tanks originally. Most of the tanks or the melees were the ones with interrupts.
All right, so I'm
No,
gonna
that's not true.
interject here, right? Because now we're going into talking about a different setting that is again MMO, which is not the same as tabletop. So we're now going into a whole different offshoot setting here. We're losing the plot. All right,
Sure.
is now I'm gonna just like stop because we're going off on a tangent here in the wrong direction.
Well, back to my original point as a defender. I personally don't feel that any particular role supports the quote unquote defender, the archetype, because anyone can make themselves tanky. Anyone can make themselves have a high amount of HP. Now, there's certain classes that start off low, but there's ways to manipulate that. You know, and there's ways to get things to enhance yourself, whether it be magically or magical items or whatnot, to make yourself more survivable in combat. And the tabletop systems don't really support the idea of someone, you know, protecting the group in a traditional defender, in my opinion, way.
All right. My opinion on that with Defender is again, you can like I said, it could be done by anyone. For me, that's why I really consider those who are much more on the higher HP tanky side and building towards that and getting feats or abilities that enhance or have mechanic that force enemies to attack them, like compel duel, things like the sentinel feat or other I'm trying to remember some of the more 3rd edition ones. There are some 3rd edition ones that like stop enemy. Then there are things where like you have the guy that's in the front line that hold their action to grapple, restrain, and trip the enemy. With various combat maneuvers, or something that you could do in the older editions where combat maneuvers, as well in 3rd edition with Battle Master. So for me, a defender is let's see again something like fear effects, which is also again this is where sometimes they overlap. Where the fear effect, like I said with Dimitri, where in its essence he was a defender, he was the big guy that stood between everybody, and with the fear effect made that you can't go past me to attack my teammates. I think it is very much possible, if very much built towards it, and I think that's the real thing. Defender is really building towards that, and people that say a defender as a role is generally suited towards ones like you said, like a paladin warrior. Those who start off with a bigger hit die, those who start off with better defensive staves like Constitution and things like that are
So
what
what if
is
you
generally.
get a situation where your DM doesn't support your defender like playstyle, like the story that you told me before with your druid guy?
Yeah, that again is unfortunate.
That's
I'm not gonna argue that one.
Yeah, I would say that's a circumstance where you're fighting a DM who is playing a chess game with you. You know, he's not running you through a dungeon or an encounter. He's looking at it as, I'm going to fight the players and I'm going to win by any means necessary, or I'm intentionally trying to beat the players because I want to beat them and not actually have a fun story or have them solve the dungeon or encounter that they're running through, to solve the maze that they're going through.
But in the same stance, I did have things that I could do to help and prevent, like, I would hate to do that same person's boss. It's like, well, I did my job. The boss can't move. The boss is stuck, and everyone is safe behind me. The boss can't really get away at this point. So, for me, it's something that is kind of trying to find the right word to say. How you build yourself, as well as an agreement with you and your DM, saying like, I came to be this kind of like big bulky guy. I'm building myself as this big bulky guy, and shit, as Crusader Jackaran kind of said was, at times you have those adversary DMs that kind of ignoring the fact that you're already in front of all these enemies. Why is like all three of them just running past you when you're blocking their way? So
Well, that could be depends on how smart and intelligent the enemies that you're fighting are. Because what if they recognize the threat of a particular character based off of a spell that they use? They can't then ignore that character, or they see a magical item that the character possesses, and what if they know it? And it's like, I can't let that person freely do whatever they want with that magical item. So then they ignore you because of that.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying, and this is where I'm talking about you coming in with ability to doing things like feats that make it that it's harder for the DM to just skirt around you in that manner.
Yeah, this is why I'm like half and half on it. It's like, while I do agree that can be defender, the game system doesn't really like fully like dive into it. Like, oh, I can truly be like an actual the defender. It's like you have to, I feel like, jump through so many hoops to do a job that you're trying to do as a defender, while some of the other roles are a little bit easier to just naturally do.
Well, I'll never forget the first game that Eve, you and I were in together as players, was in Benefactor's game. And I remember I blew everyone away. Every motherfucker at the table. Blown away. When my little monk, first time they see this guy in action, I move up to the door frame. And it's like, Benefactor's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, I take the dodge action. And everyone's like, what? What is the dodge action? We have no idea. And it's like, I'm standing here in the center of the door frame, so no one can pass me. They're not allowed to pass through my space. And then everyone came at me. And you, I don't think you got to play that game. That was when you dipped out. But I had set it up so that you with your halberd would come up right behind me and just start poke, just poke of death all day.
That was actually Gilliam.
No, it was Eve's character. It was Eve's character. He
didn't have Albert.
Oh, I don't remember. He was a lancer to my knowledge. Like, you might not have a halberd.
Was that? Are you sure? I think I might have been the.
He was a ranger. He was a ranger. That's all you're talking about.
No, that was
because I had a dragon partner as a companion in that one, I think.
Yeah, he was a ranger. The only person that was straight out melee with you besides Drake, who had the greatsword, was Gilliam. That was Gilliam. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it was Eve, because after that he was no longer with us. Like, him and I were gonna clash. He was a noble.
He wasn't a
Remember?
noble. He was part of a different military faction from you. He
Yeah,
wasn't a noble.
the Sky Knights, right?
Yeah, and he was a bowman. He was a ranger. He's even telling you he was a ranger with a dragon pet.
I'll concede.
Remember, he had the dragon pet.
I don't remember a dragon pet at all. I don't remember that at all. I remember him just being a dude with a lance. That's how he was described. He has a lance.
I wish
It wasn't a
Gillian was
halberd.
here.
It wasn't a halberd. It was a lance.
I wish Gil was here online, but he's out. So he can't
Did
miss
Gilliam
this one.
have? Did Gilliam have a lance at the start of the campaign?
He got a halberd.
Yeah. That's not a lance.
Because you guys started with a ranger, a warlock, a monk, and
Cleric.
and him as a cleric, and then you had him Gilliam as a fighter. That was you guys 5 starter.
All right. Well, like I said, whoever it was, I'm pretty sure it was Eve's character, and he had a lance. Described he had a lance. So I was like, oh, okay. Me and this guy are gonna go we're gonna be head to head, role play wise, but also it's like we're going to ironically be companions because we're both tanks, or not tanks. One is a tank, the other is like a melee ranged fighter. But you're saying, I'm telling you, you might want to go
the
back.
guy is right here himself.
I know. I'm telling you, go back to that game. You could probably go back to that page where
is my character sheet still active on there?
It should be.
What's his
I
name?
can't get on right now.
where we had the crowbar, where
Drake had the crowbar.
Drake had the crowbar. All right, right there. Okay, we got in right as we got in, and there was the dungeon there. The people were all killing themselves to sacrifice to the gods. Okay, right at the very entrance when we first got in there, Eve's character was with us, and he was right in the front line, and you made him use a lance or a lance attack because he wasn't there. He couldn't play.
I might have had a melee weapon, but my primary weapon was a long range.
Yeah, that's possible. That is possible.
I don't remember the
You
melee
said
weapon.
Sky Knight, or I was told Sky Knight.
If he was stuck in melee where he can't shoot the bow because of disadvantage, if he did have a melee weapon to use, I might have did that, but he was not going to use land.
Yeah, like I said, I remember the Sky Knight part now that you mentioned it. And I might have translated that as, okay, he's got a lance, he's called a knight, so he's a melee fighter. That could be where I'm mistaking. But like I said, I know for a fact he had a lance, and I know for a fact he was in melee.
Well, you guys kind of got yourself stuck in melee, which he wouldn't be able to shoot from, and knowing how he plays.
Yeah, well, it's close quarter combat. It was CQB.
Yeah, so
it was in a tight hallway. We didn't have a choice.
Oh, all right. So moving on from there.
But yeah, my point is that was a monk defender. Okay, and I remember I blew people away with that. It was like, wait a minute. My first action in combat was total defense. And you knew what I did. The other players didn't, because I intentionally positioned myself in the door frame, so they had to get through me to get to everyone else in the party. And my thought was, well, if I'm blocking the door frame, because I think we were fighting a battle on 2 fronts. They had one guy who we just got done clocking, and then we had the door that we had to worry about. If I'm remembering how the layout was, it was kind of like on an elbow in the hallway.
What I will say is the idea of a defender, I feel, is more of a mindset than a true play style, because Benefactor, we had a thing with Gilliam, who wanted to be basically a defender type person, but he didn't do any defender type actions. He spent more time attacking than anything, and you had to, on multiple different instances, tell him, well, you can take the dodge action, you can try to grapple someone,
Yeah, I watched 2 players do the same thing. Yeah.
I was gonna say he's seen one turn into a gun.
But I feel like the defender play style is more akin to a mindset, that you have to understand that you actively have to do things to protect.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, then you can effectively be a defender.
Well, right. That's what I was going to say. And I would agree wholeheartedly on that. Like I said, I have a tank mindset. So every role I play, I am completely jaded in what would the tank do. Now I have to train myself whenever I play, like, say, my barbarian, who he's not a good example. When I play my rogue, okay, I have to go into the mindset, I am not the tank. The tank is going to be doing his job, so I have to do my job, and my job is this. So I always start with my North Star as what's the tank doing, and then I adjust around that. If I'm the healer, then it's like, okay, as Benefactor saw when he was his toad, it was like, okay, my job is to just keep him alive. So I'm just going to focus on healing the tank, everyone else be damned. And I got a lot of flack for that. But, to me, the tank or the defender, you're right. It is a mindset to have, but you don't have to necessarily be committed 100% to that. Drake was a great example in Benefactor's game, where his method of healing was doing damage. So if he eliminated the enemy, then he wouldn't have to worry about healing as many people or healing as much damage. So he was looking at it from those numbers. Now, once damage started incurring, then he started distributing heals. Well, a defender can take the mindset of, well, we have the circumstance under control. Oh, wait, now we have civilians in danger, and our paladin with his sword and board can't defend. So me, the rogue, I'm going to jump over and protect the civilians. So it is a mindset, but I would say it's more in line with, say, a specific role. And then everyone else can kind of jump in and out of that role temporarily or circumstantially. Whereas if you're defender, if you're going in as like a paladin tank, your mindset is, I'm committing to this idea.
Because a defender action could be, I don't want the healer healing so much, so let me apply an ability that reduces the damage that everyone takes. So that's less overall healing the healer has to do. That's why I more akin to it a mindset, because you have to think of that in order to perform the action. If you're not thinking in those defender ways, then you're not going to do it.
Which I don't disagree with you. I tried to teach that lesson like very, very many times.
While you come from,
Yeah.
like you said, while you come from a mindset of a tank, I come from a mindset of being played multiple different roles in various different systems. I don't just stick to one particular thing. I jump around because I like to get the feel of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm always thinking about the various different things I can apply in very different situations. It's why I view the support role as interchangeable for some things, and depending on how you decide to support.
Well, I think all of us can agree, all of us, that support is the most flexible role out of all of the roles, right? Can we agree on that?
Yeah, sure. I agree on that.
Yeah, I'd say it everyone can do support. It's not, I want to say easiest. It's the most flexible role.
Yeah, there's so many different abilities that could classify as supportive that a lot of people end up having it. What we discussed earlier, that people tend to not pick supportive abilities right off the rip. They focus more on picking damaging abilities more than supportive abilities.
All right. Hope everybody enjoyed that little discussion on Defender there. Sorry, excuse me there. Now, this was the one that had thrown Crusader off earlier when talking about it. And this is generally the much more or less of a combat role and more of the social aspect of tabletops. This is the face role. You know what I mean? Those with very high charismatic skills or abilities that can help accentuate those charismatic skills. What classes do you think have the easiest time to be the face? Since technically anyone, especially in like 5e way of doing it or the D&D way of doing it, where you can put skill points in the old editions or make some proficient in it, or and put into charisma where you can be a face. What classes help support being a face? I'll let Crusader, who's the most confused on it, hear what his side of things is on that. Crusader?
Well, my notes on it say I have no idea what a face is. Oh, that's literally my notes. I have no idea what this is. But having listened to having this conversation go on and have a better grasp and understanding of it, face class, ranger, paladin, rogue, bard, and maybe sorcerer, maybe monk, maybe druid, maybe cleric.
Okay, you put almost every class there.
Almost.
But,
Fighter I wouldn't put, barbarian I wouldn't put, wizard I wouldn't put, and warlock I wouldn't put. Now, not saying they can't, but to my thoughts and my processes, those aren't the classes I would throw into that role.
Okay, why
Which
so?
may make it interesting if someone did.
Why so? Especially the warlock. I'm very surprised. A lot of people consider warlock as well as paladin one of the best faces you can have.
Probably my Judeo-Christian upbringing that makes me say warlocks aren't good at social skills.
Especially since they're both charisma-based classes, they tend to be a lot easier to get those roles. And warlock does have various things up with deception, persuasion. But okay, I was just curious on that one. All right. How about you, Eve?
You pretty much mentioned it. Bard has an easy time with it. Rogues, I think, could be a really good face depending on how you go about it. Definitely warlock and paladin. Sometimes cleric.
Okay.
Because I feel like, especially if you go I'm really about my deity life, the you focusing on the doctrines that your deity brings can cause for unique social interactions.
Well, let me ask you guys this, okay? Why not a ranger? Because that was like my first pick in my mind. Like ranger, not my first pick, but it's in my mind that's like one of the like top tier choices for a charismatic character is a ranger.
For me, it's because the ranger as a class itself doesn't necessarily support well being a face. Can it be? Anyone can be. It's that you build towards, especially for something like that. This is a role play role. But in terms of also having things like abilities and things that assist in being the face, the ranger doesn't really have that particular skill set built in. That's my reason why I wouldn't say ranger as a class makes a good fit for the role of face. Can he do it? Oh yeah, I would not tell someone, oh, because you're ranger, you can't be a face. But I would say they don't have anything that really supports them in that manner. Ooh, excuse me.
In Starfinder, there's the envoy and the operative, who primarily function as the faces of the class systems. Like, they have an easier job at being the diplomatic ones, the ones who can deal with social interactions. The Solarian as well, because it's charisma based, can do it as well. And what was the other one? The Mystic can do it well as well, based off of their connection.
Okay, so that's on Starfinder. They have their own thing. What are the skill checks for charisma in Starfinder? You can pique people's interest. Do you know them on the top of your head?
Yeah, but it's the same thing. It's I don't know why I'm enjoying a black at the moment. There's
Diplomacy.
I was going to say, what's it called? In Cypher, they have some interesting metrics for how they do their speaker class, which is there's things you could do, like you can bring up the past, you can call on old friends, you can have a common friend with someone. So say you're walking up to like the blacksmith, you can use an ability roll to be like, hey, I want to make this guy and I have a common friend. Like the speaker class is just engineered and designed to communicate and do all sorts of social interactions and party lines, party favors, all kinds of just things that you like. I don't know how you would implement them, excuse me, in a Dungeons and Dragons game, but for Cypher, they work really well.
Okay. Well, I know Cyber is not really a class-based system, so we can't really be like, oh, what class?
It has it. Oh, let me talk about that real quick. Cypher's classes are Warrior, Explorer, Speaker, and Mystic. Those are the 4 classes. And classes is in quotation. Technically, it would be the D&D equivalent of a class.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go in if no one has
Yeah, I
any
was
more
gonna say what what is your choice of a face class?
Oh, let me finish what
Oh,
Benefactor
sorry. Yeah.
asked me, because I was drawing a blank, so I got some assistance. So so there's bluff and diplomacy is the major one, the major ones.
the major difference.
Yeah, and you can technically use disguise as a way. It is a charisma based skill, and you can disguise yourself. But those are the predominant ones.
Do you have intimidation?
Yeah, we
Is it
do.
charisma based?
It can be. That's why I didn't really say, because some classes can change intimidate what it can be. But yes, it is
Oh, okay.
baseline wise charisma based. I was more like referring to ones that just are purely charisma and can't be altered in any way. But there's some classes that can alter the use. For example, life science and physical science are normally int based skills, but a biohacker, if they are studious, can use not studious, instinctive, can use their wisdom in place of their intelligence as the core thing. And there are classes that can do that, that will change the ability associated with a skill to fit whatever need they have.
Which is a great thing. Oh, that sounds quite nice. It is something that's technically optional in the 5e rules to let you use a different score of particular things. Like you can use strength for intimidation as a variant rule that they do have. But it's great that
Yeah, I like that one.
Starfinder fully supports classes being able to change what skill stat uses. And on to the question of my favorite faces, a bard. The stereotypical. Come on, we all know the whole joke with bards and things like that.
The meme, yeah.
Yeah, paladins, similar to clerics. They in terms of how E described it, with law and faith and various things, depending on which edition we are in. And that they're great people. They're known to be, in general, just as trustworthy. Paladins are trustworthy. They make great faces, like great holy knight, or something like that. They make great faces, and their abilities also accentuate that. The 5th edition is definitely a lot more down to your subclass, more so, that will give you those abilities to really be a face. But because they're already a charisma based class, it really just accentuates that, as well as that they're proficient in those skills to start off with. Rogue is good faces, which I did agree with. And the one thing with rogue being good faces is because their ability to manipulate dice within 5e, that I know for a fact, and be able to not really fail particular skill checks and things. They have various ability that, and as well as expertise. So they have a lot of various built-in things that help them if somebody chooses to want to be that charismatic rogue and be that whole like real talkative rogue. They somebody let their guard down so that they can steal something, do anything. Rogues. I kind of want to make charisma rogue as you have a different one, but it's really depending on the campaign. So it's something I just have sitting there.
You can do that in Starfinder as the envoy or operative. You have a fun
Stop tempting me. Stop tempting me. If Tyler dies, maybe stop tempting me though.
I was gonna say I've seen my sister-in-law. She once played in the first campaign I ever played with her. She once played a charismatic rogue, and she had no idea how to do anything with a charismatic rogue. And like she's over here, like I'm gonna use my bow, and she was following around. Shall we say our favorite edgelord, who is also playing a rogue, but he was playing a dexterity based rogue. So she was following him around, trying to mimic him, but not as successfully as he. because she had no idea how to use her charisma for anything and had very, I don't want to say weak dexterity, but she didn't have like the best dexterity. So she was suffering from a weak attack and not knowing what to do with her roll. And then her best stat, she had no idea how to even use that.
Well, I guess we could chalk this up to similar as we said at the start, as well as with Defender. You know, you kind of have to know it, as it's kind of have to be a mindset, because just because you, and it goes again, just because you have points and charisma skills and everything, you still have to know how to role play that kind of charisma skill.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
In the same game, my brother, these two are married. My sister-in-law and my brother, they're married, and they both rolled charisma-based characters. My brother was playing a charismatic paladin. She was playing charismatic rogue. And even though her charisma, she couldn't use her charisma, what she did understand about the rogue is stay the hell out of other people's way. So she didn't get in anyone's face. My brother, his paladin, his problem was he assumed that everyone out of game would rally behind him and fall in line with his vision for the party. And it's like, you have this high charisma score, so you're great at talking to NPCs, but you didn't take the time to talk to anyone else in the party to get us on your page. My character was with him because my character is was a bookworm, a sniveling little, bookworm. So like, he's not going to be jumping in front of people. So he was socially awkward and conversing with people. That's how I played him. He had a low charisma score anyway. So I was like, all right, I'll follow you. I have no reputation or anything. I have nothing to lose. Where everyone else was like, I just want to kill stuff. I don't want to talk and have social interactions and things like that. So you're right. It is a mindset, but it has to be as a face, you should have like a cooperative mindset. And you should have a mindset of, I'm not just trying to cooperate with my team. I'm also trying to cooperate with the world, or trying to cooperate with the NPCs that I talk to. You have to treat each interaction, if you're charisma based, you have to treat each interaction like it's its own encounter, its own person, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I was just thinking about on the story and what you were saying. So just trying to like fill in that and digest that information a bit.
Sure.
And yeah, this kind of also goes into, again, the thing to start with, really talking to your group both in and out of character of what you plan on doing and being, what your forte and stuff is, and kind of get an understanding of where everyone's going. Sometimes maybe if their characters are about their kill lifestyle, maybe you can make that a role play thing with the other characters about, we could do this a lot easier without risking the death of somebody. And again, this goes with actually being a little bit charismatic, a bit in real life, especially with other players, because something may let you, but generally for things like that, you can't really roll against another player for. It's kind of one of those hard things to be like, oh, roll against their persuasion and things like that. I know a lot of DMs don't want to take that kind of autonomy away from their players by forcing it into a PvP dice roll of skills. So yeah, it's one of those hard things. It's that face, it has its uses and it's very dependent on the campaign. If you're in a high combat campaign, you're gonna find yourself as a face really lacking on being able to use those skill sets. But if you're in even just a general 50-50 kind of like between combat and social, or you're in a heavy role play, you're gonna be real top tier there. So what about you, Eve?
In terms of what? What about me in terms of what?
The face.
Uh,
That's what we just talked about.
it's it's literally more of what you said, because it's all about the social interactions. But if you're not in a high social game, you're making this really socially adept character, you're not going to be able to, put your chops to the test. You'll probably have your niche moments where it's like, yeah, I got my time to shine. But um, I guess it depends on it, because there are some systems that allow your faceness in combat to work as for example, there is a feat in Pathfinder. What's the name of it? Uh, it's a branch off because the last one is gory finish, but I can't remember the one before it. But basically, it allows you to perform an intimidate check when slaying an enemy, and if you succeed, right, you kill the enemy in such a gruesome way that you instill fear into to all the people that can see
I
you.
can see it's in like a particular area of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it requires a prerequisite feat that I can't remember the name of, and it's a dex based thing, and I created a character like that. It was a bard. It was a dervish dancing bard who used his performances to dance and behold a sight on the battlefield to inspire people. But he would strike fear in his enemies as well by slaughtering people on the battlefield like really badly. You know, devoting everything I had in basically direct dex and charisma. And I used that charisma aspect of it to fulfill the roles of my intimidate status to intimidate the foes. While outside of combat, I was very charismatic and was able to talk myself out of most situation and increase people's favor and whatnot. And if need be, I also had intimidating prowess as a feat to increase my likelihood of successfully intimidating someone. So a face doesn't always have to be like the friendliest person. The phrase can be this grungy, like listen to me or die.
Yeah, the
you know
intimidator. Yeah,
Basically a
you're right.
warlord.
Yeah,
yeah
the intimidator, pretty much in essence. Yeah, no,
yeah
you're completely right.
So it really boils down, but like Benefactor said, it's goes back to the mindset. You have to be able to think of these things in order to implement these things. If you're not thinking of interesting ways to use your kit, you're not going to be able to effectively use your kit. And Crusader said that person built a charismatic character and didn't know what to do. you know
Yeah. A little off topic, but this is why I love feats. This is why I love just a bunch of splat books, so you can always make
well, I
these
do
characters
because
special.
the feats are what I like about feat system in general. Even though they can be daunting if there is too many of them, they allow you to fixate on the things that you want to improve upon on your overall concept and make it better or make
Yeah.
it more efficient.
Maybe we should have a topic talking about feats and whatnot. That's not like something that we could also get into, but we'll discuss that at a later later
Oh,
point with each other.
I remember it's called dazzling display. It's dazzling display into gory finish.
Well, there you go, folks. If you're ever playing within third edition, you should look those two feats up. If you want to be a charismatic, intimidating, well, he used bard, but hey, it could be any other class you want that can go there. It'd be great if you did it with, say, like barbarian. It's like kill them and be like, fear me, and holding their head up and everything. Be like, oh, yep.
In the
This.
in the
Sorry.
old Icewind Dale game, if you had enough strength in your attacks, you could literally cause enemies to explode into blood and gore. It was beautiful.
Now, this one, I'm pretty sure this is the most hated in terms of just how people view it as a group. But this is the healer party role. And what classes you guys feel fits really well with the healer party role. Now, again, this is real simple party role. It's the person that heals. It's very just straightforward. It's the person that heals. You know what I mean? Use restorative magic. Now, I also count this. That's outside restorative magic, which counts also at times a little bit mixing of the removing bulk things like we talked about earlier with curse removal, lesser and great restoration, things like that. But what classes do you guys feel fit this role? Like, this one's gonna be short. I already know. We'll go with Crusader.
Well, my choices for it are pretty simple, I would say. I'm thinking cleric, druid, paladin, and ranger.
Ooh, Ranger. Okay.
Yep. Oh yeah. Look. Leo's MVP.
Uh, What about you then, Eve? That Ranger one caught me. I want to hear explanation, but we'll go with Eve real quick.
Cleric, Druid. I would include Ranger as well. How effective are they at it compared
Depends
to
heavily on the circumstance.
yeah, but they definitely can fit that role, especially when you really consider what healing is in tabletop. You know, it's
Yep.
not the same as a traditional MMO, like the way you think healing would work. You know, it doesn't function in the same capacity. So with
Yep.
that being said, it does put Ranger in a spot where they can fulfill that role. Um Paladin, definitely. And you were talking about non subclasses, right?
Well, if you want to include a subclass, by all means, I'm fine with that because I was actually going to go into that on my part, so I'm pretty sure we're going to say the same one.
Sorcerer.
Yep, we're going to say the same one there. Okay. So yeah, so you guys kind of covered. The only one I was a little surprised about, I was like, okay, I get your point with Ranger. So mine is really no different in that regard. I was gonna mention Sorcerer with the Divine Soul specifically. But I'm not gonna tear you guys to pick. Say what subclass you may want to add into whatnot. I just didn't want to go into all the subclass that could fit into this role. I just want people to understand that there are subclasses
No one
that
picked
could.
barbarian. Why wouldn't you pick a barbarian healer?
Hey man, you never know. Mouth to mouth can be used as resuscitation, right?
I cannot with you.
These hands I call defibrillator. What's a defibrillator? They pound people back into life.
So I heard Eve stay with Ranger, and I want to hear Crusaders with Ranger. I was like, oh, Ranger, okay.
All right, so they have Cure Wounds. That's their big heal, Cure Wounds. They have Good Berry, which, okay, 1 hit point, right? 1 hit point. It makes it so no one has to eat for the rest of the day, which, if you have someone who's incurring exhaustion, that's automatically, or that's one criteria, probably the hardest criteria under tough conditions. That's like the hardest criteria immediately met, which means the only other conditions you have to meet to take care of exhaustion is have a full night's rest where you're safe and you're capable of actually sleeping and being comfortable. So if you have a bedroll and you get a full 8 hours of rest or a long rest, you're fully healed, or fully. You are removed of 1 level of exhaustion because you have to have food. That's the first criteria. Food, 8 hours sleep or a long rest, and comfortable or reasonably comfortable to sleep. Those are like the 3 criteria for exhaustion. So a Ranger with 1 ability knocks out one of those, arguably the hardest of those 3 to maintain. And then on top of that, that doesn't include the Ranger's ability to naturally harvest the environment to survive whatever conditions or environmental hazards you're in. So they can find cures for poisons using plants. They can also harvest poisons for plants or through plants. If you want to look at the route that they can mitigate healing via travel, so instead of encountering things from long travels, you can get places quicker and faster. You could argue that that's healing. And then let's not forget the MVP, which is spirit healing or healing spirit. Pre-nerf, that's absolutely MVP.
Okay. I have no argument with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot another one. If the Ranger can summon animals, that animal can take damage, which is effectively damage mitigation the party is not taking. So that'd be the last little criteria I would add there.
Okay. All right. I gotta figure this one will be real quick and easy. It's healer. Like, come on. So this one I also think would be a little bit easy and wouldn't be too much contention between us. The scout. Same thing, what's the role of a scout? Obviously to go and scout ahead, go traverse ahead, see if there's any danger, traps, whatnot
This
lurking.
one, there's actually a lot more classes to it. Scout is probably the next to Blaster, probably the most inclusive class or role there is.
Okay, what classes do you think make good scout or support scouting?
Ranger, Druid, Monk, Rogue, Fighter, Bard, Wizard.
The Bard one is the one that kind of caught me off. Okay, Bard. Well, I think I see where you're going with the Bard when I think about it. It's
Yeah.
a very dependent situation. Like
Yeah.
we're going into like a
Well, the Bard can do it in both a social environment, but they also can do it in a like a wilderness or a because typically, at least in my experience with bards, they typically have a higher dexterity than strength. So having dexterity allows them to hide and do stealth checks a lot more efficiently than otherwise. Bards, depending on the player and how they want to build, they can also have a good wisdom score, which if they have a good wisdom, that allows them to do better survival checks and do better perceptions.
I was also going to go along the route of they get expertise in jack of all trades, which will help. But yeah, scout like face is
Sure.
something that is I think something that's very versatile depending on how you do it. What about you, Eve?
So when you're talking about scout, do you only mean scouting as in walking around the wilderness, or do you consider information gathering scouting as well?
Infiltrating, yes, infiltrators, trap finders, stealth scouting, or as we said with we also generic to the bar and social interact, we can technically consider infiltration where you use your face and stuff and whatnot as well to help.
All right, so then
scouting.
everything Crusader said, but then I will also include Warlock, Sorcerer.
Yeah, I would say yeah, those are probably good ads too. Yeah.
So pretty much them in the face is something that all classes have a way to variably do. You know, even if some may have it better, you know, yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
thinking about it. Barbarian could also
Yeah.
do scout.
Because of the trap finding, yeah.
The paladin is probably the one I wouldn't instinctively call on for scouting.
And I agreed that I wouldn't say paladin either.
But with spells like divination, with the divination decipher under the tools of casters, they can be effectively used for scouting, just not in the traditional means of what you think scouting.
Yeah. Like I said, like paladin is like a fighter is another one. A fighter I wouldn't instinctively go to for scouting. Okay, now if it's like a cavalry based fighter, if it's a certain build of fighter, I might say, okay, this guy can scout. If we don't have my go-to, which is a ranger or druid, like those two are my number one front line. I want you scouting.
Like I said, I already figured scout. I feel we're not gonna have too much of a contention on. It's all like we've gotten down to the ones where I'm sure we have a heavy agreement on. You know what I'm saying? And I said, the bar one, I was like, when it thought about me mentioned, I was like, okay, no, yeah, I would actually include Bard under that when you say it and think about it, like, yeah, I would include Bard under that. Okay. So I wanted to ask this during the healer one, so it's gonna be a little bit going back and forward. But at least for the Starfinder section, you know, can you tell us about the quote healer classes and scout classes that you feel are in those games? And then with Crusader, I know you it's not really a thing there, so I'm not sure I won't hear about the Cipher one as well. If there's anything you can say with that, but we'll go with E with Starfinder.
For healers, it's the Mystic and the Biohacker. Um, I believe one of the newest ones, Precog, can also do it as well. In terms of healing, not many. See, so when it comes to healing, almost every single class has their own way of self-sustaining. But so because of that, uh, multiple classes that need healing don't really exist that often. Like there's not many things. It's like, oh, you have 7 different people who could heal. More like, oh, a Solarian has a way to self heal. A Vanguard has a way to self heal. So the people we need to actually be able to heal other people go down when other people can find ways to self sustain. When it comes to scouts, however, that's more more broad because there's so many ways to be. So the fighter equivalent is called soldier in Starfinder. So a soldier can scout, an envoy can scout, an operative can scout, a mechanic can scout depending on the mechanic tricks they can get. Plus, they have something that allows them to hack things from a distance. So technically, they can hack surveillance cameras and survey the areas through surveillance through the cameras that they gain control of. You know,
You're making me
technomancers
blush.
technomancers can do the same thing. They can create their own little drones and also manipulate technology as well. The precog class can use divination spells. The witch corporate can bend reality to suit the particular needs for scouting by changing the very terrain itself. Or there's a lot of people who can scout in ways, and because it's more future tech based, there's technology that can help you scout. So even if you yourself don't have anything, you can buy drones that can fly around and scout for you.
Just make sure I have a computer, right?
Yeah, you have to have a computer and be able to have access to the computer, which is not that hard. But you know,
All right.
I
What
see
about?
the advantages of having technology makes it more versatile in terms of how many people can actually perform the scouting role.
Okay. How about for Cypher? Since again, you said it's really minor class system with the four.
For
Uh,
Cypher, I would say it's a little bit more niche. Um, you'd only have Explorer and the Mystic. Those would be the only two who could. Well, maybe Speaker too, if we're talking like social environment. Where I would say the Warrior has like the Warrior is almost completely combat centered. Like just everything about him is I'm here to fight and fight and then fight. He doesn't have anything in his base kit that lets him do like a social interaction thing. That he would actually have to call upon the DM and say, "Hey, I want to do this thing. I'm going to spend XP to do a thing, or I'm going to spend my hit points to do a thing." Whereas the others, the Explorer is like intended to be like your Indiana Jones type. So they're capable of scouting ahead, searching for things, finding artifacts, acquiring information from people. Like they're meant to do that. They have all kinds of like acrobatics. They can climb walls. They can dodge or shimmy across cliff sides. So like they're intended to do the scouting idea, or the rogue and scoundrel and scout. And then the mage or mystic, they can do like far sight, they can do far seeing, they can peer into the minds of people, they can detect the presence of people, they can do all kinds of things like that. They can communicate with nature, so nature can actually report to them details that they want to know. It just depends on what the genre is that you're playing your Cypher game.
okay. That's an interesting thing to note. Hopefully, people in here they'll give both of these game systems a try and see what kind of role they want to make or build within these. The next one I'd like to talk about. Again, we're now at like the real easy part, in my opinion. This is like Striker, which I think is very dependent on which edition you're playing. In terms of what classes can't fulfill this role. So I'm gonna cut it short for me personally here and say with 5E, I only feel there's really only two classes that don't fit the Striker role really well, and that's pretty much Bard and Druid. Everyone else pretty much fit the Striker role of being, that big single target damage dealer and disabler. You know what I mean? How about you guys? We'll again starting with 5e, and you want to talk about like third edition, Pathfinder, and the other ones by all means.
I would say I'm gonna let Eve go first.
I'm not sure what I have to say about it, really.
Okay, I can take over on this one. Because the idea of Striker and now understanding Blaster and Striker being the opposite. Because because my understanding of Striker is a lot more limited than how you said. Striker is a single target damage dealer. That's not my interpretation of what a Striker is. But then I would agree that that if that's your definition, if that's the definition of a Striker, sure. But I'll elaborate on what my definition prior to that is. A Striker is someone who can get in and out and deliver a lot of damage very quickly. So for that, I mainly focus on a melee attacker, though I guess there are some wizard builds that can do the whole get in and out thing. But I would focus on, for a Striker, I would go rogue, ranger, monk, fighter. Those are the guys that I would go to as get in, get out, do their damage, and get to safety.
Really? Not barbarian and paladin?
No. Barbarian, and that could just be my playstyle, my bias, as well as same with paladin. Both of those two, to me, are commit to the fight. They're engaging. They're committed to that fight. Now they can. That doesn't say they can't retreat or fall back, but like I'm thinking of their like the idea of a paladin is, while they are a crusader, they are also a defender. Like, they are innately trained to defend themselves. They're innately trained to take on a tanky role, to be unkillable effectively. A barbarian is, sure, by like concept, they're supposed to be a hit and runner, because they're naked. But with how the rage mechanic works, they're not a get in and get out. They're an all in type of class. That's how they're supposed to function. You get in, you kick the ever living shit out of them. Contrast that to monk. Monk, with its key points, is encouraged or incentivized to be able to get in, annihilate the target, and then get out with your key point, using it to dash an obscene amount of distance. An obscene, not abstain.
Okay. That's your viewpoint on the
Does that help give you some more laser focus there, Eve?
Yeah, because for me, when I meant the Striker, not inherently like its sole purpose is to single target, thing, is just more of they're best at it. Like, they're best at picking something and like, zeroing in on, like you said, in and out, type fighting style.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, they have to pick a person to go in on and then retreat, and then pick another person to go in on, and then retreat. So they're still, in a sense, focusing on one target at a time. They're striking, in a sense, striking hard, strike fast. In your example,
yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, my interpretation of it is it's a get in and get out character. So, like, okay, the paladin can be here. Hey, I'll open the door for you. You have to climb the wall, get up to the balcony, assassinate the dude, and then jump down here quickly so we can get out.
So the name is the thing that's really throwing you guys off, because you're thinking of the
I basically take Striker and use it synonymously with
melee attack. Okay.
No,
the thing with Striker,
not necessarily melee attack, but assassin.
All right. Well, Eve is a lot closer to what is really what the Striker is. Someone that throws a pile of damage on a single target at a time. You know what I mean? It's not really the whole game. You can do it with like a wizard or sorcerer, where you can just blast one target with a really, or disable them with a really powerful spell or ability, and knock a single part out with just a really big amount of damage.
This is why I was like, it's hard for me, because I'm like, every class of 5e, I feel like I could do that.
Well, Druid and Bard, honestly, is not that.
Yeah, I would say Druid and Bard don't really have that power, that output.
But that's why I was saying, you can also go into the other editions and explain, or another game system like Starfinder, and get about that. Because again, Striker is a lot of you can fill it. So I already figure,
Well, in Pathfinder, a Bard has no problem being that like high burst.
which is why I said if you want to go into past editions, or you're good to go into that.
Oh no, definitely. But that's why I said that's why it's really difficult for me, because I don't know how to approach it, because I feel like if you build a certain way, you could be a striker. You just have to know what the class can and can't do, and then build towards that. Like, what's the limitations of it? While there, I feel, will be other classes who have an easier job at being a striker because of their innate skill set. You know, what's to say I just can't pick things that zero in on focusing, like as Tyler example, you're a mechanic, you zeroed in on sniping. You can fulfill that striker role. But for example, Quig, he chose grenades as a mechanic. Same class mechanic, just you chose to be a sniper for the mechanic. He chose to be grenades. And he's just chucking grenades, which can explode. He's not focusing on one target. He's focusing on you know multiple. So I just feel like if you are trying to be a striker, pick something that you feel will facilitate that, and go all in on it. Like, go all in on trying to find the best way to be that striker, to see this target and blow the even level and shit out of it up. Like, just blow it up.
Yeah, and that is a job of striker right there. As he said, your main purpose is just to blow one target straight out the asshole right there. Okay, so we're all kind of in a general agreement with just striker for the most part. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty much simple. The last one was support, which we kind of went into with both controller and defender. So probably gonna, for time's sake as well, and not reiterate too much stuff. This one I want to ask both of you, real person, a real good question. Again, because this is more player based than DM based for this, because I feel personally a DM for these kind of things I want to ask you guys should not really put themselves involved in this kind of aspect. So I feel this is definitely something that we have to come to you guys from a player standpoint. And based on these roles, what do you think as a player would be your favorite role? Which we kind of touched on for Crusader, so I'll let Crusader to iterate that for himself a little bit more for people to hear.
Which role did I seem or indicate that I liked?
I don't know. I think it starts with a T and ends with Ank.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I was thinking classes, not roles. Yeah. For me, tank all the way. Defender. That's me all the way.
Oh, so you're guy just like, just my favorite role is gonna be defender. Do you have any secondary one? If say someone else is like, can I be the sole defender in the party?
If I were to do anything else, I would go striker then. Okay. Knowing the new definition of striker, I'd go with that.
I see it, Mr. Always talk about your barbarian when it comes down to talking about being a player. All right. Interesting. Okay. How about you, Eve?
I don't have a favorite role. It's literally mood dependent on what I want to do. I generally enjoy them all, like, legitimately.
I can't even laugh or say anything, as I said at the start. I'm very fill and versatile, so I enjoy each of them for very different aspects and different play builds. So it is hard.
Yeah, very. So would we do like preferred? Because I can't say a favorite. Maybe I could prefer.
Yeah, please. That'll work as well.
So my preferred would be support.
Okay. Yeah, if we go into preferred, I could do that.
But support is so broad, so
for me it would be defender and striker. Defender and striker with a little bit of controller. Like I said, with my two so far characters for Crusader campaign with Dimitri and Tomias, which Tomias originally supposed to really be a striker, but with how the party was standing, they really needed like that defender kind of guy. And then when we did get a defender, I still had to stay defender because our defender couldn't defend. Like, couldn't really strike till we got much later on. We were just like, you know what, I'm just start blowing things up because I'm tired of this. And with Dimitri, definitely was the kind of guy that's just gonna walk in as a defender and just like anything that comes before him, he will strike down. But his main thing was always fearing and just making sure like you're gonna come at me. Don't worry about those four guys behind me. it's me you're coming with. Okay. And my next question to you guys is, what would be your ideal 4-man party composition as a player? And we'll again go back to Crusader.
I would say my ideal composition would probably be Ranger. If you can't tell, I really like Rangers. Let's see, Ranger, Cleric, definitely a healing Cleric, and probably Druid. I'm going to say probably. I'm going to commit to that. Druid. And lastly, I would go with I'm going to go with a Paladin. I'm going to say Paladin.
Now, the B part, this is my fault. I should have actually edited it to really clarify that. So, what roles would you like those 4 party members to fill with you in that composition? So, so your favorite will say Defender. What would you like the other 4 in that party composition with you to fill out?
Okay.
No,
No,
it's both picking them as the class and what roles.
Yeah. So now that context. So then my default would be Druid Defender. That would be my default. I would have a Ranger Striker. I would have a Cleric Healer, a Paladin Controller, and since you gave me that 4th slot, or 5th slot, I would go with a Wizard. And go with a Wizard who is a Blaster.
Yeah, I could have state that question a little more thoroughly, but
it's all right.
It's meant to be the
4
people you have with you, and it should be 5-man party. It'd be the 4 people that will be alongside you as a player.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I posed the same A part B part question to Eve. It doesn't have to be 5E. It'd be easy for the most audience, but I don't.
I'll use 5E. Fighter. So I have to pick 4 members, including myself, and and I fulfilled my preferred role, I guess, support, right?
Yeah.
So fighter, bard, wizard, and warlock.
Okay. What roles do you like those guys to fill out?
So the bard would be the face. The fighter would be the defender. The wizard would be the controller. And the warlock would be the blaster.
Okay. Oof.
The warlock would interchange between sorcerer, but I kind of like warlocks more.
All right.
That's just a me thing.
This is where I find myself in a bind answering this question, because it's the class I kind of want to be is a little skewed.
Just go with the all rogue team.
No, all right. So for me, it would be cleric.
For you, it would be all wizards. I know.
It'll be a cleric with me.
What role? What role is the cleric?
Healer.
All right.
Because what I'm gonna do is take wizard and be the controller.
Oh my God, I hate you.
This is where
so both of us has the wizard and the controller spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if I could go into like Pathfinder and be a necromancer, where I actually can necromance a lot better with 5e. Definitely doing that. My problem with 5e is it doesn't really support necromancy, which is why, as Crusader may have noticed, I'm always kind of like flip-flopping with Paladin and Wizardry as my favorite 5e, because it's like I like being a wizard, but I hate that I can't be a necromancer without like homebrew. And the Paladin just feels a lot better for me in 5th edition than in 3rd edition without, a homebrew. So it's kind of like an issue with both of them on those sides there. So there'll be a cleric that I'll have there as pretty much a healer. Me, the wizard with controller. The paladin, the fighter, is defender. It's one of the two that is really, really rough for me. Because I love both of them for the advantages that they bring. But I'm probably gonna go with all around thanks to the paladin's aura. Really pick the paladin for the defender role. Then I would have a ranger for striker, and this is where I'm just so. This is where I'm really fighting between like face and scout. So depending on the campaign, as long as like I'm much more secure in a scout than a face all around. So I'm thinking about having a rogue as a generic scout. And that would be like my perfect party composition there that pretty much covers things. As my favorite 5-man party composition I would love to go with.
Okay.
Okay. I tried talking and I hit my center mouse wheel to talk, and it's like, why am I not talking? I'm not hearing the Discord click. I'm figuring this computer stuff out.
So that's the just of my stuff. Anything you guys want to bring up?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think we covered it pretty well. I'm trying to think if I could draw on any of my Star Wars knowledge on this, because Star Wars, the version of it that I'm playing is definitely different, because they don't really like the controller aspect of it is like there isn't very much, like if you're not a droid, there isn't really much controlling, quote unquote, that you can do. Like the Jedi have their force powers, and that's essentially it. Like you have to be a force user or have a droid to do the controlling aspect of it. Both types of scouting work in Star Wars. You can do the technological, where you hack into a computer, use your pet, or you can physically go to a location and explore around. Everyone is a striker. Blaster, however, there really isn't any AoE in Star Wars 3.5. I don't know of any AoE spells beyond, like, I want to say they have Cleave and Greater Cleave. That's about it. I'm sorry, they might have Whirlwind. So it's like extremely limited in AoE. Face, pretty much every character could be a face. No, they have a specific class. They have the Noble class, which their entire shtick is social interactions, but they also have the ability to make almost any skill a class skill, which is kind of handy and nice. Healer, their healing classes are basically tech specialist, noble, and soldier. So they're kind of limited. Oh, and Jedi, and one Jedi has the ability to heal. Will heal really well. Both Jedi can heal, but support, I think they all can. Pretty much everyone in that can do some level of support. Defender, they have a Jedi class that's good at defending, and they have soldier, which is pretty, or a soldier and scout who are pretty good at defending. And I think that's all of the roles. Did I cover all the roles? Scout. Yeah. I covered everything. Yeah, so that's just me doing a quick rundown of the Star Wars 3.5 version and their roles. So, what was the next week's topic we wanted to talk about?
I proposed. Eve proposed something I think earlier that we said he was gonna do. Do you remember what it was, Eve?
Yes, it was discussing the GM starter guides or the handbooks that are given that are advertised out as something that DMs should get if they want to get into
Starter packages and things like that.
not just that, but the actual DM's hand guide or player hand guide.
The DMG, the PHBs,
Yeah,
those things as
okay.
well. Yeah.
So source materials, basically.
yeah, as well as the starter stuff as well, like the beginner packs and
Okay.
are the beginner boxes worth buying, and that stuff, or worth getting or looking into.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. I am Crusader Jackaran. This is my co-host, the Benefactor, and my other co-host, Evangelion. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, those of you in the future who are watching us. And you guys have a good one. And I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Bye.
See ya.